Hello and welcome to Tracking Trump on Decoder. I'm Nidhi Razdan. When Donald Trump took oath as president for a second time this January, we knew this was going to be, shall we say, a colorful presidency, one that would leave its mark way beyond the borders of the United States. So we decided it was worth tracking Trump on a weekly basis because so many things were changing so fast, it was almost hard to keep up. And now, more than 6 months later, Trump has inched closer towards authoritarianism at home, whether it's through mass firings of federal employees or the weaponization of anti-immigrant raids, in which even legitimate students have suddenly seen their visas revoked and been thrown out of the country. He's gone after those who have opposed him in the past, even law firms that once represented those that he sees as his enemies. Trump has also passed a major law recently that will see huge tax cuts for the rich, but also major cuts in social security spending, including health insurance for millions of poorer Americans. Abroad, he has wreaked havoc on the world's economy through his arbitrary tariffs and half-done trade deals, upending America's closest alliances and making the US one of the most unreliable partners for anyone. But when you take a step back and see, Trump has actually ticked off quite a few of the boxes on his to-do list, and the US Supreme Court is helping him along. Here on the program this week to talk about the Trump presidency and where it stands today and the impact it's having both at home and around the world is Martin Wolf, Chief Economics Commentator for the Financial Times from London. Martin Wolf, thank you very much for being with us today. As I said in my introduction, more than 6 months into Trump's presidency, it does appear that he's pretty much getting his way on his main ticket agenda items, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's absolutely clear. Overall, the details are always more complicated and there have been some surprises. But what he has done is very much in keeping with what informed people expected him or thought he would try to do. And if you look at the picture of the world today, as you say, basically 6 months in, it's going absolutely perfectly from his point of view. He is wreaking havoc, or alternative view will be he is creating extraordinarily rapid revolutionary change at home and abroad. So he will feel very, very happy.
I just wanted to sort of divide this into different sections and first take a look at the tariffs, because that's what everyone's talking about right now. What do you make of his sudden decision to impose a 30% tariff on goods coming in from the EU and Mexico, two blocks with which the US was actually still holding negotiations? There's a 1st August deadline now that he's put in. But it's just the sort of unexpectedness, the arbitrariness of it that's again taken people by surprise. And what is the impact that's having both on Europe in particular, which is a big trading partner for the US, and you think then subsequently down the line on American consumers and their economy?
Well, one of the things we've learned is that his approach to deal making, the way he thinks you should do deals, is to be surprising. That, he thinks, gives him the tactical advantage. So being unpredictable is, in a sense, the only predictable thing about Trump. So none of the things that he's been doing now, at least since he introduced the so-called Liberation Day tariffs, proposed them on April the 2nd, and then backtracked very quickly, none of this is really surprising. And that links directly to your second question. Well, what will it do to trade with the EU and Mexico or other countries he threatens, Japan or South Korea? And the answer is nobody knows, because nobody knows if he'll go through with it. He may backtrack again. My colleague, Robert Armstrong, coined this brilliant acronym, TACO, which means well, it doesn't mean what it normally means in food. It means Trump always chickens out. And that's what the market seem to believe. So it may turn out that these tariffs he's announced aren't going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised. He may feel they're just a way of getting the negotiations started up with more pressure, more vigor. Trump is completely unpredictable, except to note his policies are protectionist, and the trade of the world will be disrupted to a greater or lesser extent while he's doing all this.
But just to sort of be the devil's advocate, one thing, as you alluded to right at the end there, that Trump has been consistent on is his position on tariffs. Right, we've heard him for years talking about how he believed that higher tariffs would bring industries to the United States and create jobs there. So could it be that actually he's not looking at this as a negotiating tool, and he means it?
Well, this is my guess, pure guess. At the end of all this, if there is an end, it might be going on like this indefinitely. He likes this. He likes the power of it. Trade policy will definitely be very much more protectionist than it was when he came in. I mean, the average tariff of imports into the US, imports of goods, will clearly be well above 10%. And that itself, probably much above 10%. And that itself is more than 5 times higher. I repeat, more than 5 times higher what it was when he came in. So there's no question policy is going to be more protectionist. The questions are how much more protectionist, how unequally protectionist against different sources of imports. Will he go ahead with tariffs of 10% on the UK and 30% on the EU, for example? We don't know. Will he end up with tariffs on the EU, which are the same as those on China? And that's not quite right, but the increase will be the same as for China. We don't know. So that's all unpredictable. But of course, the thrust is protection. And the last really big question is, will he keep changing things all the time? The world economy can adapt to protection. It'll be costly, it's stupid, it's undesirable, but it's impossible for businesses to make serious investment decisions if they don't know what tariffs will be next week. And that characteristic of Trump is clearly, in a way, more costly than his the level of protection.
So where does that leave India, which is had sent a team to the US recently to try and secure some kind of a trade agreement? I believe they're back to talking, hoping to have something on the table before the 1st of August. But they've run into a stumbling block, particularly on agriculture and I think the auto sector as well. How do you think India is placed in this negotiation with Washington?
A very good question, which I discussed with very senior people, including ministers, in Delhi on a recent visit. So India seems to me to have an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage, well, perhaps 2 disadvantages. The advantage is Trump likes India, he likes Mr. Modi, and he and his administration generally regard India as a potentially significant ally in their rivalry with China. So that's a big plus, and it counts for something. Also, I think he thinks that Mr. Modi and he are sort of a bit in the same ideological camp. But the disadvantage India has is it is quite protectionist, and since he dislikes countries that are protectionist against the US, he has some ammunition there, and India is not very powerful economically, so it can't do the sort of damage to the US that they feared China would. So those are the disadvantages, and I think there is, finally, you mentioned this hugely sensitive issue of agriculture, on which I know pretty well since I've been traveling to India for half a century and used to work on it for the World Bank. Obviously, agriculture is spectacularly sensitive for India, and the US wants to create openings for agricultural exports. That was a problem in their negotiations with the UK. It's clearly going to be a much bigger problem in their negotiations with India.
While you said, that he likes Mr. Modi and, seems to generally like India, and that could work to our advantage. But the fact also is that he's, announced some of the harshest tariffs on his own allies and friends. Look at what he's done to Japan or South Korea. I mean, nobody is Trump's friend. And this, of course, then in turn has geopolitical consequences, doesn't it?
Well, I don't think when you refer to them as his friend, that's a slight misnomer. That's why I
Or
separated
America's
out.
friends?
But yes, that's an important distinction. What I said was there are Americans who regard India as their friend, but I think he regards Mr. Modi as his friend. Actually, I think he regards Mr. Xi Jinping as his friend, strangely. Uh, um, and he clearly rather thought Kim Jong Il was a friend of his at one stage. So and he certainly thought Mr. Putin was a friend until he stopped being. But but the key point I wanted to make: the people that have historically, the countries that have historically been regarded as friends by Americans and regarded themselves as friends of America, are not necessarily countries that Donald Trump thinks are his friends. The EU has been in a close alliance with, indeed, to some extent, it was created by America. But Mr. Trump does nothing but complain about. I am going to quote him, so that may forgive me. But he said the EU was created to, quote unquote, screw us, which is a lie. But never mind. So he doesn't regard the EU as a friend. He does seem to regard the British as a friend. Well, not really surprising, but I think what he really regards highly in Britain is our royal family and the golf courses. I mean, he's a very strange man. It's not possible to analyze him and his doings in the way you would really any other leader of my lifetime.
Absolutely. What do you think India can do though on this issue of agriculture, because it is politically hugely sensitive, as you rightly said, here in India. And if it is in Trump's head that India is being too protectionist, it needs to open up this sector to American products and all the rest of it. This is going to be a minefield for India. And how should it handle this?
Well, my view is countries have to define their absolutely overriding interests. From my point of view, I'm not persuaded that the farm policies of India, taken all in all, are the best for India. But that's a separate matter. The Indian government and the Indian people recognize the immense importance of the farm lobby, and they can't sacrifice that for any trade deal that will favor some other less important sectors. So there you have some red lines. Now, if you can't do a deal without sort of crossing those red lines, then you probably don't get a very good deal. Could India survive without a very good deal with the United States? In my view, yes. There are lots of other trading partners for India. Most of the world economy is not America, and you do your best in the deal you can do with America. India, in my view, should be opening up to the rest of the world, to Europe, and is trying to do so also, I think, to China, but that's a more controversial issue. But India has to make strategic choices of where its fundamental interests lie, and it can't risk domestic political instability if that's the real danger here, in order to get a deal with the US. And it's going to be difficult, but you do your best.
And what does one do when Trump begins to use tariffs as a means of coercion? Look at what he said, to Brazil a few days ago, and drew a sharp reaction. I mean, when he uses it as a political tool, in a sense, to make threats.
Well, I think you need to do what the Canadians have done. Ignore it. I mean, Canada is going to be more damaged than Mexico, too, than any other countries. They're more dependent on the American market than any other countries. They do an enormous proportion of their trade with America, but there are always limits. It's a tragedy, but I think a country like India, which is much less dependent and is, in the long run, in my view, going to be a superpower, has to defend its interests. I mean, what his demands of Brazil about how the legal system should operate in relationship to a former president who tried to overthrow the results of an election, the Brazilians are clearly absolutely right to say nothing doing. We're not going to give up on this because the interests at stake are so fundamental. So there are deals that countries have to be brave enough to say we're not going to take. And surely India is in a position to do so. I think India is much too protectionist. I think it's in India's interest to liberalize trade more. I think it's been a mistake to remain as protectionist as it is, but it shouldn't sacrifice core interests, genuine core interests, political stability and prosperity for any other country. India is important enough, significant enough, and powerful enough to defend itself. And it can
What
do so, I've suggested,
Right.
in line with others. It can collaborate with others.
When we look at America's relationships, though, with other countries, as I was talking about geopolitics, is America today perhaps the most unreliable friend or ally for pretty much anyone? Because even when you look at, the relationship today with, look at how he threw Ukraine under the bus, for example, or his relationship with India. We had a very serious escalation with Pakistan recently. And I think Trump, I've lost count, it's I think been more than 20 times he's said he brokered a ceasefire. It was because of, he used the trade card. This is something that India has denied. Even Mr. Modi has denied. And yet he continues to, keep saying that. Surely at some level he would know that this is something that Delhi wouldn't be happy with, and yet he does it. So, is America really a reliable partner for anyone anymore?
Well, I think the question should be reframed, though it feels as though it's the same question. Is Donald Trump a reliable partner? And the answer to that is absolutely unambiguous, because we know his whole life story. And the answer is no. He is not a reliable partner because he's a supreme egotist. The only person in the world he cares about is himself. He will use people and he will discard people because he thinks that's the rational and sensible thing to do. It's what he learned from somebody very influential upon him, a lawyer called Roy Cohn. So he is unreliable as a matter of principle. He thinks he should be unconstrained to do what he thinks is in his interests now. And if his interests change, well, he changes it. So to give you a wonderful example, he agreed a very good deal, as he himself said, with Mexico and Canada in his first term after a long negotiation. I think it was in 2018. And now he scrapped it completely. Well, that was only a few years ago. So, yes, he is completely unreliable. And so long as Donald Trump or anyone like Donald Trump remains president of the United States, the country is completely unreliable. That's the one thing you can rely upon.
Looking at, his domestic agenda, is it now fair to say that he's in the authoritarian zone? Whether it is the way he's trying to control government employees, their numbers, making them subservient to his agenda. Look at the way the Justice Department in the US now functions, the way he's weaponized these anti-immigration raids and ICE agents who are now apparently going to be emboldened with more money and more people. And he's also got the backing of the US Supreme Court on so many of these things, which seems to have emboldened him even more. So are we in that authoritarian zone now in reality?
The answer to that is 100% clear. There isn't any real doubt at all. This is an attempt to create an authoritarian government in the United States, in which the head of state and head of government is effectively above the law and is answerable to nothing except himself. That is, I think, clearly what they are trying to create, above what he's trying to create. And he has quite a large number of supporters in the administration now and outside who want this to happen. So the question is not whether that is what is happening and what they telegraphed they were going to try to do. I mean, it's been completely obvious to my mind. It's been obvious since he first emerged in politics, but it's absolutely obvious since the attempted insurrection at the end of his first term that that's what he's trying to do. He has molded the Republican Party completely to be subservient to him. He's got rid of everybody who had any genuine independence of will or action. The only question is, will he get away with it? And
so far he is.
So far, but it's still only a few months into his first term. So the question is, will there be free and fair elections for Congress in 2026? Will there be free and fair presidential elections? Whoever the candidates will be in 28. In other words, do elections still hold, as they clearly, for example, we now know do or have held in India? And will the courts are still fighting over whether or not they will constrain Mr. Trump. And as you say, rightly, a lot will depend on the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, in my view, has made many judgments which are, to put it mildly, questionable, but they haven't yet given up completely. So will political and legal constraints come into effect? That is what I think we're going to discover over the next 4 years. And I think that's still open. Personally, I've had many discussions of this with dear American friends. I think the odds that they will turn America into an authoritarian state are really quite high, probably greater than 50%, but they're not 100%. Let's be very clear. This is a fight still to be fought, and the American people, the American institutions will have to decide whether that's what they want.
The big beautiful bill, which was his sort of pet legislation that he's signed into law, that, of course, to just summarize for our viewers, looks at huge tax cuts for the very wealthy in the US, but also cuts down on social security spending. So a lot of not so well-off Americans who had health insurance cover, food stamps, etc., they're going to lose that. Even projects related to climate change, money's been taken away from that. So he's putting more money into strengthening the borders, on the immigration department. How key is the impact of this legislation going to be in the run-up to next year's midterm polls politically? Because the impact of this law, I think, will take some time to be felt. And does it give the Democrats an opportunity, to seize on the fact that it could affect a lot of working-class Americans?
Yes, this is a really fundamental question. I think we have to say, it's a very obvious contrast with Mr. Modi, for example, that Mr. Trump's is a very strange form of populism. There are two sorts of populism going on in the world. One is sort of populism. Well, I will ignore the left populism, which is rather weak now. So just focus on right populism. Some, like, for instance, Poland's populism. They are very culturally conservative and nationalist, but they actually believe in welfare. They're quite generous to poorer and lower middle class people, and that's one way of doing populism. Now, Mr. Trump talks like a populist, but as you rightly point out, if you look at what he's doing, it's massively regressive. It's what I coined the word Pluto-Populism, from plutocratic populism, back in 2006 to describe this sort of populism. So the tariffs themselves, you mentioned this, tariffs raise revenue. Tariffs are immensely regressive. They're a tax predominantly on poorer people, because they're the people who buy imported goods, and that's a large part of their income. So the answer is, he pretends to be a populist, but actually he's ruling for the uber wealthy. Now, can he get away with that? Well, he seems to be amazingly good at it. People who are not going to be benefited from it, but perhaps because of racial reasons, cultural reasons, some religious reasons, very important in America, are deeply wedded to him, even though, as an economist, I think what he's doing is going to harm them. Will he get away with that? Well, he doesn't need, to defeat him, you don't need all the Americans. You only need him to lose 3 or 4 percentage points. Well, that could happen. Remember, he only won by 1.5 percentage points in the last election. They have a structural advantage, but still, he could lose, and this interlude would turn out to be an interlude. At the moment, we don't know, but it is a very strange form of populism, and there should be lots of people who feel very, very disappointed because they're going to be much worse off. And lots of people are almost certainly, because of the health aid cuts.
And they may only know the impact of this in a few months. They won't know the impact of this right away. One last question, Mr. Wolf, which is on the path that the Democrats may choose to take, in terms of how to deal with Donald Trump. Now, what do you make of Zohran Mamdani's win, for example, in the Democratic primary in New York City? He's, of course, describes himself as a democratic socialist, and his ideas are very much to the far left of the party's ideological wing, and it's made a lot of the more centrist Democrats uncomfortable. But some believe that perhaps the Democrats may have to take a more extreme left position if they want to counter the right-wing sort of ideology of the MAGA. Is that the way you think that they may go? Is that too risky? Or do they need to stick the course as a more centrist party?
Well, it's a wonderful question, and I'm the wrong person to answer it, because the knowledge that is required of American political sentiment is really, I would have to be honest, that's above my pay grade. I would, however, suggest that normally American elections have been won in the center. You can't get too far from the center. And therefore, it has been the received opinion of all my Democratic friends that that's where they need to be to win elections. Now, Donald Trump has challenged that. He has shown you can win when you're really not at all close to the center on many, many axes. So maybe it is possible in this very disturbed, ideologically riven country to win from the further left. I am suspicious. I suspect it won't work in America, but I do understand why Democrats begin to think, well, if Donald Trump can remake the political platforms of the US, completely remake politics, well, maybe we can do the same thing. I suspect it won't work, but it's not surprising if they try it.
Absolutely, and I think the question would also be if you see growing inequality, especially as a fallout of this new law, what is the impact that could have on American society? We don't know then, which path the Democrats may choose to take. But very interesting conversation, Martin Wolf. It was wonderful to talk to you about the Trump era part 2 so far. We would like to have this conversation again, perhaps maybe at the end of the year when we look at 1 year. Thank you so much for joining us on Tracking Trump this week.
It was a great pleasure, and I think it was a very useful conversation for me too.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that's it on the episode this week. We'll be back next week with much more. Do join us then.